Hey folks, welcome back to another episode of the Field and Garden Podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Mason Ziegler, and friends, I loved the conversation you're about to listen to today. Val Schirmer of Three Toads Farm has become a really good friend. She and I made the initial big connection, I would say, back as both of us were serving on the ASCFG Board of Directors. We sat next to each other. Typically, those board meetings were weekend meetings because we all had to fly in from wherever, right? And so we kind of all staked out our spot at the big table at the beginning. And I can still remember the first meeting she and I were together, and I was so impressed with her business savviness, which she brought, as you will learn today, from her previous job in the corporate world, and just so much more. And her amazing heart of a teacher, and just, I guess, her marketing savvy that she zeroed in on some great opportunities is what led me to ask her to tap her on the shoulder to actually do an on-demand course for us. And you'll learn more about that. But I want you to, a couple of phrases of things that Val mentioned during her talk today is that something that really stood out as she was saying it was Val does not see other flower farmers as competition. And I think that this is such an important point for us to kind of focus on, that we come together and work together and build a better market for the end customer, whether that person is wholesale or a retail customer. I just think that Val has an amazing amount of business savvy that we can all learn from. And I learned a couple of things from her. So let's take a listen to meet Val Schirmer of Three Toads Farm, and can't wait for you to hear. Val, I am so happy to be here having this chat with you here today. Welcome to the Field and Garden Podcast.
Thank you, Lisa. I'm really excited to be here.
You know, Val and I have been friends for a while, but I have questions for her today that I don't even know the answer to, friends. I felt like it was time for us to get to know Val a little bit deeper, where she came from, how she became flower farming, and kind of what her journey has been. And so I'm just really excited to ask her. I have some questions that we're going to shoot to her, friends, and see what her answers are. So Val, you know, it's always so interesting to find out the walks of life that people have come from that have entered into flower farming, because it is as different as every day, isn't it? I mean, it's crazy.
Yes. I love hearing people's journeys as well. And so mine started when I was growing up in Colorado. That's where I'm from. And I was the oldest grandchild for my grandparents. And I adored both of them. At that point, there was nobody in my family that had a farm. Everybody had single-story houses, chain link fences, because they grew up on dirt farms in Kansas, Arkansas, Nebraska. So they had all pretty much run away from that. And my grandparents had a big yard, and my grandmother grew flowers, lots of flowers. And because I adored her, I adored the flowers. I planted some growing up, you know, nothing really to speak of. But then when I became an adult and I ended up moving to Kentucky, and then we moved to the country in 1990 on the farm where we are now, Three Toads Farm, I was dying to try to grow flowers. And luckily, everything I planted here grew. And so that's what started my flower journey. I always worked in corporate America. So I was working, but I had this little idea in the back of my mind about growing Oriental lilies. I had seen them at White Flower Farm in the 90s when I went there with my sister. on our annual sisters flower trip. And so I wanted to try to grow them here. And so that's kind of what started my journey. And that was around 1997.
All right. So let's warp forward then just a little bit. And so you say corporate America. So what kind of business model, what kind of business were you working? And just to give us a little bit of what you brought from your past that might be helping you today.
I worked for a company called Valvoline, which is the Valvoline motor oil, Valvoline instant oil changes, and then also the parent company, which was it was called Ashland, and it was morphing from being a regional refiner to a global specialty chemical company. My role was corporate communications and also marketing. So that was my background. Awesome. I ended up heading global communications for them. And a lot of what I learned, I also have applied to our business, such as branding.
That's awesome. So who introduced you to flower farming and how did that all go?
Well, I read Lynn Basinski's book, The Flower Farmer.
Right.
And because when we first moved to the country, we had no money, like zero money. And I had bought Martha Stewart's gardening book, which cost $50, which was a fortune, but I spent the winter reading it. And that's what planted the seeds in my brain. And so I ended up getting Lynn's book, devoured that. Through that, I ended up actually learning about the Association of Specialty Cut Flower Growers, about growing from, which was great for me because they always had flower stories in there. And so that's what really started it.
And so tell us kind of how you started and how that all evolved. I mean, we'll talk in a minute just about what the business kind of grew to be, what your niches were, but how did that happen? I think it's so inspiring for people. I mean, people love hearing, I, like you, had no money, had no background, and so I feel like it's really a door that anybody, some doors just open, other times we have to knock the door down, right?
That's right. That's so true. Because I did not grow up in a farming family at all.
Me either.
Yeah, my husband did. He grew up on tobacco farms and stuff. So he had actually farmed. I had never farmed. I just loved flowers. And people ask me regularly, like, how did you learn all of this? And I read a lot. I tried a lot. And then I've been to now like lots of flower farms and things. So that's how I learned. But so in 1997, I had this dream that I want to start a tiny little business growing Oriental lilies. A good friend of ours, Charlie Hendricks, and also his wife, were over at our house on our big country front porch. Charlie likes bourbon. I overserved him bourbon because I had this scheme. I wanted to start a little flower farm and I wanted to grow Oriental lilies, just as a little side business. And so I wanted him to do it with me because I knew I needed help. I mean, I was working all the time. I couldn't do it all by myself. And since he was retiring, I thought, oh, this is perfect. So finally, after I don't know how many bourbons, he said, what is it you want to do? Okay, I'm in, but what is it you want to do? And I said, I want to try to grow the kinds of flowers that can stop people in their tracks. And that, I don't know where that came from. I was obviously drinking too, because that's pretty harebrained, but that really started it for us. He agreed, okay, let's do Oriental lilies. And let's sell them at the Lexington Farmers Market. And so I had been a test grower for White Flower Farm, which mostly meant because they're in Connecticut. So they would just ship me things and then see how they grew here. That was a test grower. But I had seen the lilies there. That's what got me excited when I saw the lilies in their white garden. But then, I mean, they were beautiful. They were white. But then when I went to the test garden and saw all of the varieties that they were testing, that's when I was hooked. So we bought 500 lilies bulbs retail from White Flower Farm, which is
Oh
high
boy.
end. And we planted them, and then didn't do a good job with them, but we tried to sell them at the farmers market in 1998. I cut them very short because I was trying to save the bulb, which was dumb. People want big, long stems of lilies. So I learned that. And then the next year, got 1,000 more bulbs from White Flower Farm. And we planted them too late. We put too much mulch on them, overwatered. It was a debacle. So decided that we needed to either get a little bit more serious or get out. And we got a third person to grow with Charlie. And I went to my first AFCFG conference in Texas to Pamela and Frank Arnosky's farm. And from that, everything took off.
Eye-opening experience, I am sure.
Yep.
I mean, it just actually gives me goosebumps to even talk about this stuff because I can remember it's like the life-changing or business life-changing things that happen when you network with other people. And we're going to talk about that in just a minute too. So
Okay.
Tell us kind of what your business developed into. I'll tell you what I think of when I think of Val. I think of your niche as being high-end, big bulbs, big flowers, and that you sold in markets, I think, to florists and designers. You've done pop-up shops and workshops. That's what I think of. So tell us about that, if that's true, and add anything I've left out.
Well, that's really true now. And, we've been in business for a long time. So, business, of course, evolves over time because originally we were selling at the Lexington Farmers Market, period. We were high end. Well, first time we ever sold our lilies for $4 a stem, I was sweating buckets. But I had been to the florist, and at that time, that's how much their lilies were. And I thought, ours are every bit that good because, like you said, we buy the biggest bulbs commercially available. When you buy big bulbs, you get a big show. You get strong stems, you get bigger flowers, you get lots of flowers. And that was our niche. We were high end at the Lexington Farmers Market. And I encouraged lots of other growers to join because I envisioned a flower market, not competitors. And so that's where that all started. At about that time, I started also forcing spring bulbs for a high-end antique and garden show here in Lexington that takes place the first weekend in March. And again, that was unusual. We were also selling lily bulbs at that show, the bulbs that we were getting in at that time. And so then over time, I actually had to step away from being as active in the business because it had become a full-time job, and I already had a more than full-time job. So, it broke my heart, but I had to step away, and I was only at the market to help out. I was only helping the two guys when they needed help. I was still forcing bulbs for the antique and garden show, but I wasn't as active. Which kind of broke my heart, but it kind of is what it is. And so I retired from corporate world in 2012, jumped back in with, both feet, huge feet, right into the ground. I mean, we started doing on the farm workshops, and that wasn't here at our farm because I wasn't sure I wanted to have visitors here since our home is here where we grow all the flowers. And so we would have it down at the other farm, which wasn't that attractive. But that's where we did it. And then Charlie's daughter, Elizabeth, was involved. She was 11 when we first started. So she was a grown up then, and she started doing weddings and events. And then Martha Stewart named us one of the top 10 farmer florists in the US, which was crazy.
And so stop right there for just a minute. Yeah. What happens when that happens? I mean, that's like Oprah pointing you out, right? I mean, it's like all of a sudden you are bombarded. And I remember Julio mentioning one time that it was like, it almost killed him when he got all of a sudden this onslaught of attention. So we might think that's our goal, but maybe not. So tell us what happened when that happened.
Well, first of all, Martha has never been to our farm, but I had taken a workshop with Aaron at Floret, and I think that's kind of how it sort of happened. But we were not huge on promoting it because, it's when you get that kind of recognition, it's kind of scary.
It is.
Because everybody starts looking at you like, in two ways. People are impressed. They're excited. Other people are like, well, who do they think they are?
Yep.
And so, we just kept doing what we're doing. I think it really helped our wedding business quite a bit. And it also showed that, or it made us feel that what we're doing is worthwhile and that our goal to grow fabulous florals was a good idea. So we've kept doing that. And today, Charlie has retired. He is no longer growing lilies. We grew those at the other farm, our other partner's farm, and they were always grown inside 2 greenhouses there. And I didn't want to move one of the greenhouses here because I have plenty going on. And so, especially, being the regional director of the Cut Flower Growers Association and now going into the president's role, that's a lot on my plate. Elizabeth still does all the weddings and events. And so we now do workshops here at Three Toads Farm. We redid an old machine shop here on the farm, and it's called Boggs Cottage, and it's a wonderful place to come. We've started growing a lot more beautiful things in our landscape so that it's not everything just planted out in rows, all the peonies out in rows like flower farmers do. It's incorporated into our landscape. And so people love coming to Three Toads Farm for workshops. And so that takes up a lot of time, and it's really gratifying too.
Yeah, I totally relate to that. That's kind of the transition that we're going through here. It's so business evolves, right? And I think having the ability to not feel like, oh, it's a failure, I'm not doing it the way I was 5 years ago, is so not true. I mean, we are constantly embracing and changing. And, I've evolved from, an acre and a half consuming my small property in row beds, to doing the landscape. And I can remember seeing the drawing of what was going on at your house that you shared on Instagram. Oh man, that must have been a year and a half or 2 years ago even. It was magical. It was really, really magical. So you're really stirring the soup. And you know what I wanted to say is when you somehow fall in to being recognized on a much larger scale, however that is, people bring out, this is the way I think about it. People bring out the cupcakes and the slingshots. And you have to really just know that's the way it is. It is nothing that you have done. And you just have to roll with the punches, right? And it's like, thank you so much for throwing that rock later, and move on, right? You have to have that personality of business to just let it roll off.
Right. Because otherwise it'll break your heart. Because if you're a flower grower, you love sharing beauty. You love that, handing something to somebody and they smile and they're so happy, and you can make their day, or you can make the day of whoever they give the flowers to. And that is what is so special. So if somebody says something mean to you, it's heartbreaking.
Deflating. It's deflating.
Yeah. And it just takes a little bit of the fun out of it for a minute, but then you get past it.
Exactly. And I really want to just highlight this part because I just want everybody to realize, I don't care how perfect you think anybody is, they're getting it too. right? I mean, it's like that's just part of it. And um, so your business has just evolved through the years, and it's just been such a pleasure to be a part as to have met you so many years ago and to watch you grow. And the way that Val and I kind of really connected was that we both served the Association of Specialty Cut Flower Growers, ASCFG, which you'll hear mentioned in grower talk so often. I was already on the board when she came in, and I've warped off and she's still there. But we sat next to each other at those working board meetings. And, I felt like it was the hardest decision I ever made to decide to serve, because who has time for that? Nobody. And the people that need to be serving are the busiest people ever. But serving has just widened the opportunities and your friendships. I mean, people often say, oh my gosh, your inner circle is like the coolest people ever. Well, guess what, friends? It came from me serving on the ASCFG board, because those are the industry, the people, the movers and the shakers, the hustlers in the industry. I mean, wouldn't you agree, Val? Nobody has time. You just have to do it.
You're right. Nobody has time because everybody on the board are active growers. I mean, we've got regional directors who are representing, Canada and then all of the US, and they are active growers. We've got the officers, everybody is an active grower. So and you're not paid. It's not a paid position.
Exactly.
The perk is spending time. Like when I first got on the board and I was sitting next to you at a board meeting, and I couldn't even talk. I was so excited to have, to be there with everybody, because it's
it's a lot to take in, right?
Yeah,
I mean, you just have no clue. As it's people, so flower farmers that are listening to us can relate to this. It's like what you think flower farming is, and then 2 years in, you realize it is nothing like that. It's good, but it's just so different. And serving on the board, I mean, I can still remember, this is not the board business, but I can still remember when we would go to Ohio, to Oberlin, where the home office to the association is. And we would stay, at the wonderful inn hotel there, and their restaurant had Brussels sprouts with truffles and honey. And Janice Harris, who is the Canadian rep, she and I mean, we would be texting about those Brussels sprouts before we even got off the airplane.
Oh, yeah.
It was just such a lovely time. And then to get down to business and to hear of the resources, the things that are going on is just amazing.
Right. It's been really tough on the board since 2020 and as well as lots of people, because we haven't been able to be in person. And that's also reflecting on what we've been able to do for the members. Last year, because we couldn't have a national conference, we started having farm tours, and we asked members who wants to do a farm tour, and we had 9 people raise their hand. And I went to 2 of them because I was hungering to be back with flower farmers, to be able to see people face to face, to see their farms. But this year, we're going to have like 40 experienced growers have raised their hand and said, yeah, really? I'll host a tour. So I bet you we're going to have 50 or maybe 60. And we'll be coming out with that really soon, because that is just an awesome time to be able to visit farms.
And I think that is an eye-opening experience. You can go to all the conferences, which you and I have pound the pavement doing that. You can sit in rooms and look at PowerPoints all you want and think but until you go to that farm and see, it's like I can see the newbies when, we used to have before pre-COVID, when I would have that once a year open farm and people would come from all over everywhere. The people that are standing back and just looking everywhere, I knew the wave was awashing them, right? I mean, it's like, holy cow, how do you keep it so neat? It's like, it is all in the planning, and it's a mower. It's much simpler than they think, but totally agree that those farm tours, I think, are what most people should have a high dose of. So I think, again, I'm trying to find the good things coming out of this crazy time that we're in.
Yeah.
The light always comes after the darkest time. So we have to look for it. And I think that if we're having that many farm tours in the coming year or years, that is definitely a great, great benefit,
Yeah, I think so too. We're getting ready to plan a national conference, and we realize that everybody won't be comfortable coming, but we'll have a virtual component too. And so everybody that can be together in person can be in person. And for anybody who isn't comfortable, they're not going to be left out.
And you know what? That's just a great idea. That's what we do at church now. We have a really aged congregation, but yet there are some people that that church was their lifeline. You know what I mean? It was so important. So now we do that. We have a gathering, but we know now that virtual will always be a part of what we do. And I think that is just another little good thing for the ASCFG too. That's because how many people can't travel often, can't leave their children or, whatever the situation is. And so I just want to encourage future people, anybody listening to this. It is not that Val and I had a full team of people at home taking care of our business and our men. Val brought her man with her. I left mine at home to take care of the dog. And, things just go, you learn how to manage better. And, I just really want to encourage people that serving is for everybody at some point in time. And it is perhaps one of the key pieces of growing my business in all ways as being a part of that group of people,
Yeah. I got so much out of the ASCFG when I first joined. I didn't understand, from that very first conference in 2000, this is where having a corporate job kind of helped because I could afford to go. Thank goodness. And people shared so much with me that's been what I do. And that's what so many flower farmers do. They share, they don't keep their secrets to themselves.
I don't want to say that sunflowers have become my claim to fame, but it's certainly part of it. And you want to know where I learned all about that? I had been growing for several years. I can still see myself standing on Vicki Standback's farm in Oklahoma. She had the calendar that I talk about all the time now to my students and on everywhere. The big calendar came from Vicki, and what do you mean you plant sunflowers every single week to have a steady supply, to build your bouquets and to sell your commercial customers? Who knew? Who knew? And then I didn't come home right away and embrace it until Dave Dowling kicked me in the britches and said, get on the wagon, Lisa, and you're right. Conferences are where you really get the meat. And then you want to become a part of that organization that makes that possible.
Yep.
You want to have more of a say. You want to be in that room where you're brainstorming of who should be the keynote, what do people want to learn about? What can we do for members like me that have been a member for way too long? I'm not even going to say, you know what I mean? It's just so totally awesome. So a couple more things as we're kind of wrapping up here. One is, the way that Val kind of warped in to become one of our online course creators and instructors was based on all of that, because, people don't really pitch to us to do courses. I kind of tap them on the shoulder, and that is based on me being a part of other conferences where they've taught, seeing that not only are they great teachers and speakers, because we can have some great teachers that are crummy speakers, and that makes it really hard to learn. And so I was looking for those packages of dynamite that I firsthand experienced in conferences, and Val was one of those. I can remember most recently when we were in Knoxville, which course you did? I think it was forcing. It's basically forcing bulbs for Christmas and during winter. And I stood up, they made all of us go up to the balcony, the board members, because we didn't have enough seats. So we were removed upstairs, which was actually the best seat in the house. And was just watched you in total amazement. And I knew then I got to get that girl on board to do a course for us. And I want to thank you so much. I know it's a lot of work to do that. And it's really, really pretty awesome.
Thank you, Lisa. That was, I like to do show and tell. And I felt strongly that forcing blooms for the holidays with bulbs, and then also even spring bulbs, because I forced those for tabletop bulb gardens, could be a great shoulder crop for flower growers. Because if the growing season doesn't kill you, and if you're ready for fall, when you get those amaryllis in, I mean, you can get, and it's the bigger the bulb, the bigger the show. I keep saying that, but you can make a killing selling the bulbs. You can sell them already growing, and you can sell them as tabletop bulb gardens. In fact, this year it was crazy. I had 1,200 amaryllis.
Oh my gosh.
Which is a lot. Last year I had 900, and I woke up at night thinking, what am I doing? This is so crazy, because I doubled it from the year before. People were hungering for it. And so I actually, in 6 weeks, I sell about 70% of my sales for the year. It's gotten that big. And that's a great opportunity for other people to learn from what I do. And that's why I wanted, when you tapped me to do that course, once I could actually talk, because I was so excited when you asked. I wanted to show people exactly what I do, where I get stuff, different bulbs I grow with, and so that they can do it too.
And so what I want to point out is, so the name of her course is Forcing Glorious Blooms for the Holidays and Beyond. And what the beyond part is we're recording this in January of 2022. And the beyond is right now, right? So it's about how to create containers that will bloom for the holidays, but how to have containers. And we're not talking about the spring bulbs. We're talking about more amaryllis and paper whites during the darkest days of winter, right?
Yeah. And that's what people send me their pictures. It's an onslaught, because it makes them so happy. Because right now, I mean, I'm looking out the window. We've got 3 inches of snow. We've had a lot of snow, which is great. But, there's nothing blooming out there. The hellebores are trying. But to have on your table a beautiful amaryllis, and it can bloom for 6 weeks, is a gift.
It is a gift. And, and the high-end containers that you demonstrate creating is, I think, the component. I see lots of people just plopping a bulb in a container and putting a stick in it and, selling at markets. And there is definitely people for that. There's a market for that.
Sure.
But your market just grows. So I just really appreciate what Val has brought we have 2 types of online courses. We have schools, which are only available once a year. And those are bigger, longer courses. Val's course is a part of our on-demand, and that means you can buy it at any time. So y'all can go check it out when you get off here. And whether you're doing it for yourself, doing it for a home gardener or a commercial grower, and she does give resources for the home gardener and commercial growers, right, Val? There's where you can get them.
Yep.
And so anyway, so you can check that out, thegardenersworkshop.com. And so Val, I want to just wrap this up and say, thank you so much for coming on in. I just loved learning more about you. And I know that people are going to enjoy hearing about your walk. Is there anything you want to add at the end here?
One thing I thought of is that I order my amaryllis in February.
Yes.
And so if this is the time to start thinking about it for commercial growers. For home gardeners, it's, you'll be able to get them later on in the fall, but commercial growers, you're going to need to be doing that. And so if you haven't taken the course yet, it's a good time to get it and take a look at it when maybe you've got 1 or 2 down days, maybe. But because then you can get everything ordered, so you'll be set in the fall.
It's true because, I mean, how many people did we see on social media, growers? Oh my gosh,
Oh,
where can I get bulbs? Well, you
yeah.
can't get big ones. That's the whole goal. So yeah, that's
Right.
a great tip. So Val, thank you so much. And I look forward to the future together.
Thank you, Lisa. It's a pleasure talking with you.
Ciao, everybody. Right, friends? I mean, not only is she a gold mine of information, which you will, if you follow her on social media, which she is on Instagram and Facebook, I recommend you do that. Val is the current president of the ASCFG, and she is, just like the rest of us, super busy, but taking the time to serve. And I was just so glad that she and I got to speak about that a little bit. And so I will put the links to her social media down below the show notes so that you can connect with her. I think that the market or her business that she developed through the years is so relevant to so many of us, from hearing how she kind of bootstrap started just like I did. I mean, it's just so reassuring when you hear that other people have done that, to how she kind of got slingshotted into the limelight and how they handled that, and so much more. So friends, if you're enjoying our podcast, I would love for you to review it. That helps us so much, and I read every one of them, as well as to share it with your friends. We appreciate when people do that. And so till we meet again, friends, ciao.